Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Burning Desire Show. I'm joined today by Phil Fraser. Thanks for joining us, Phil.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Much appreciated. Yeah, so we came to be based on the watch business, and then I looked at your profile and I thought Phil's an interesting guy to have on the podcast, and so thankfully you were grateful enough to come on the show and talk about your kind of your journey, your experience, which is super interesting to someone like me, anyway.
Well, I hope your listeners think it's interesting as well.
We will find out. No, they will for sure, for sure. So, as I say, always in the pre-call, and people probably get bored of me saying this, but the quote of my favorite quote of all time is a Steve Jobs: "You can't connect dots going forwards or any backwards." So, with that vein, I like to try and understand the thread that gets you to where we find you today. Um, I mean, talking of kind of academic school, that kind of thing, were you particularly fond of certain subjects? Were you the guy that did the homework and got the A's? Were you the guy that didn't bother? Like, what was that kind of like back then?
Well, at school, I think I thought I was quite clever. But the problem I had at school with both O levels and A levels was I didn't put the effort in. So I stumbled like a marathon runner over the finishing line at A level and managed to get myself to university.
Okay.
And university, I enjoyed a great deal and managed to sort of get through without touching the sides. I got uh, older listeners will remember a Desmond. I got a
Right.
Desmond two. I got a Desmond Tutu, um, and then fell out into the world with no idea what I wanted to do.
What was your
And
degree in at university?
so my degree at university was in politics. I think I picked that for two reasons. One, I enjoyed politics generally. But secondly, and I think probably more importantly, it sort of kicked the decision can further down the road. Because anybody who's done a social science knows it keeps all the, in a positive way, keeps all the doors open and doesn't close any doors. So, uh, I fell out of university pretty much with a blank piece of paper and a 2-2 degree.
So when you went to choose the university subject, did you purposefully choose something that would allow you to, as you say, kick the can down the road and to have that open canvas, as it were, after university?
Very much so, very much so. And I now do one of the things I do is I go into local sixth forms and talk to them about careers and CVs and job interviews and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things I tell them is A, to get as highly qualified as they can, and B, to not close any doors. And
Mm.
that's pretty much what I did to get to the point where, and a lot of people still do it, and maybe less so than in my day. But when I recruited and when I was being recruited, there was almost like a default in your application of must have a degree. And I always say, I say to these kids, if it says must have a degree and you haven't got a degree, you ain't going to get an interview. It doesn't matter how brilliant your CV is. If they say you must have a degree and you haven't got a degree, you won't get an application. So that's where I sort of fell out of university with no idea what I wanted to do. And my parents pushed me towards, well, got me an interview with a friend of theirs who owned a chartered accountant.
Okay.
So my first job was as a trainee accountant, which I just about lasted a year. And I clearly remember when I went in to see the boss, who was the guy who my parents knew and who'd got me the job. And I went and he said, "Look, thanks for the opportunity. I'm really sorry. I'm leaving." He looked me square in the eye and said, "I think you've made the right choice."
That's funny. I think it's interesting actually, and it's quite a refreshing and different approach that you mention, going to university and doing a subject that gives you that open or clean canvas to work from. Because it's funny with my brother at dinner the other day, and he was talking about, when he eventually has kids, his view is, which a lot of people hold the same view, that unless it's a law degree, a finance degree, a medical degree, something that will lead directly onto a career, his personal view, because that's how he's got on in his life, is it's not a waste of time is probably not fair, but that's probably his words. But you saying actually allowing yourself that breathing time and delaying potentially. And I think people do forget that university is the first time for a lot of people that they are in the world learning general skills that they might not otherwise have. So that 3 years can be very, very useful, if not just to get some paperwork at the end of it. There is quite a lot to that for sure. So you fall out of the accounting, but here's another thing that I find interesting is that, and I generally see this more with successful people, is that they seem to be comfortable in saying this isn't for me, rather than what a lot of people would do is just stick the course. You know, your parents are finding the job. It's kind of embarrassing. It's a friend, and a lot of people would go, "Oh, I'm going to have to just stick with this now." What is it in you, do you think, that just goes, what is it just not right? You just felt something's not right. It doesn't fit in. I'm not happy. Like, what was it at that point?
I think I mean, this is, you know, I'm older than I look. This is this is going back quite a long way. I think at the time, so I'd moved back to Leeds. I studied at Leicester University.
Okay.
So I'd moved back to Leeds. I was back living at home with my parents. And I think there were a number of things at play. At the time, I was planning on getting myself a flat and moving out. So obviously, having been away for 3 years and then going back home with mum and dad, I think there was that was at play. The other thing, I think, if I remember rightly, I was about to retake some exams that I failed a bit of. So it was a stick or twist point of you either start revising for these retakes or you don't.
Okay.
And I think those two things at play just made me go, yeah. And the really difficult thing about it was, I started on the same day as another guy, also called Philip. And it was like we were like chalk and cheese. So I was never cut out to be an accountant. He started on the same day as me. Bearing in mind this would have been 1986, 85, 86. The other Philip is still an accountant. So everything we did was this Philip did this. Yeah, but this Philip did that. This
Okay.
Philip's really good at this. This Philip's not really good at. And it just wasn't for me. I mean, you know, I actually, and again, I talked to when I talked to sixth formers about this. Every job I've been through, you pick something up, you learn, you put it in your skill set, and you move on. So I learned about double entry bookkeeping. I learned about profit and loss. I learned about balance sheets, and sort of further down the line, that was a good foundation for starting my own business. So it wasn't. So although I failed as an accountant, there were positives that I took out of it. And you grow. You know, it's your first proper job. You know, you forget when you employ people, and I've employed graduates, and you just think, geez, these are supposed to be, you know, the cream of Britain, intelligent people who've come out of university, and they haven't got a clue. But I remember back then, I was exactly the same. I've never worked in an office, you know, put a suit and a tie on and all that sort of turning up at 9 o'clock in the morning. You know, I was lucky to get to a 12 o'clock lecture, you know. So it was, you take something off everything. And I think the other thing that was the push there, I had a number of friends who were down in London and they were having a great time. So I said, right, I'm proper Dick Whittington. I'm going to go down to London, seek my fame and fortune.
And what did that look like?
Now, this is the weird thing, and I still don't understand this. All the way through my younger years, and almost to a degree now, as a small child, I was devastatingly shy. Wouldn't say boo to a goose. And you develop as you go through school and university and all that sort of thing. So me as a really, really shy person, and still inherently a shy person, got a job selling.
Okay.
So what I ended up doing, I got a job. It was scoured through the job pages in the Guardian, and as I say, a couple of friends who were down in London were doing the same. And I ended up selling advertising space. So I sold advertising space over the phone in a trade magazine called Campaign, which is the trade magazine for the advertising industry, and I absolutely loved it.
So you were selling advertising for the advertising industry.
Yeah, so I was working on the classified pages. So I was selling basically job ads to ad agencies,
Right.
which obviously is quite cool because advertising is a cool industry. But it was good old fashioned banging on the phone sales. We had a target of what we called 20 effective phone calls a day, which meant you had to speak to a decision maker 20, not the same decision maker 20 times, 20, 20 different decision
Yes.
makers every day. And that usually meant making upwards of 60 outgoing phone calls a day,
It's
5 days a
that's
week.
not a bad hit rate. In today's
Yeah.
world, 1 in 3 would be decent. I don't think it's
Oh,
like
absolutely. Absolutely. And we were trained old school sales techniques like AIDA and DIPADA and things like that, which people, if you search them out, they're mnemonics for ways of structuring a sales call. So again, in the same way that I learned the basics of accountancy in my first job, I learned proper basics of selling in my second job.
it's interesting to hear that you were shy and you went into a sales role and you flourished and enjoyed it because those roles, which obviously exist today, they call them telesales, I guess now, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
I've done a touch of that, and I would class myself in a business sense as particularly outgoing, but I found it very difficult, very, very difficult. It's constant, like you're constantly just like being rejected after rejection after rejection, and each call you got to put on this like a fresh kind of canvas, and it's hard. It's hard work.
yeah. We were told smile and dial, don't moan and groan. No, don't moan and phone. So smile and dial, don't moan and phone.
It sounds very Wolf of Wall Street.
It's terrible, isn't it? A proper Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah. I think, and again, I think because it was telesales, and it sort of put that barrier between me and the person selling to.
Oh,
And I
okay.
think I found that sort of protective. And I think maybe going down the years, that's possibly how I ended up in online. So you've got that little sort of
Interesting.
barrier.
Interesting.
I'm sort of post rationalizing here, but joining your dots. But that may
Yes.
be maybe where it happened.
Possibly, possibly. So, where at what point is I might pronounce this correctly? Is it Brom or Brom Agency, or how do I pronounce that?
Yeah, that's Brahm Agency. So that's a big step. So if I give you, if I do a quick jump of
Segue
the
into that.
dots,
Yeah,
jump of dots through that. So I moved from telesales to a different magazine selling display advertising. So that's the big color
and are
pictures.
you financially doing well enough to keep yourself in London? Let's put it that way at this point.
Well, London wasn't as expensive as it is now,
Okay.
but we regularly hit targets, and I drank most of it.
So you were living what you were living well, like you weren't like scraping around at that point.
Yeah, I was actually sharing initially renting and then bought with two university pals.
Oh wow.
So we were having a ball of a time. So I went through uh, uh, classified advertising, display advertising. I then left the display advertising business, went back to the recruitment consultant who'd got me both of those jobs and said, I want to change jobs. And she said, do you fancy being a recruitment consultant? I went, yeah, all right, give that a go. And again, picking things up, being a recruitment consultant gives you a great skill in judging people very, very quickly. Because obviously you've got lots of people coming in and bashing them out to jobs. So I did that, then went back into advertising sales. At that point, met my then girlfriend, now wife, who obviously you've met.
Lovely. Yeah.
Decided we wanted to move back to Leeds. I got a job with Yellow Pages because they had a Leeds division, which meant I could move back up. Absolutely hated that job. I mean, with a passion.
So
It was dreadful.
what was that job? Or what in that job did you hate versus what you loved in the previous ones?
So, so by that time, I was a team manager. So I moved up to back up to Leeds, and the way they went through some training process, and they then had this way of thinking, which was, well, okay, before you can be a team manager, you've got to prove yourself in the field. So it was a step backwards, going back into sales. The way they used to target you, and those of you who remember Yellow Pages, was big, thick directory. Basically, and this is very simple, this is simplifying it really, really simple. Basically, go, right, Phil, you've got pages 1 to 500. That made £300,000 last year. Your target is £330,000 this year. You have to then go and visit the plumbers, the decorators, the builders, and try and sell them a bigger ad, because obviously you've got to improve your. So it meant, turning up. And this is not me being, I'm too prissy now to do
Sure.
proper sales, but
Sure.
bloody hell, getting in the car and driving around and visiting people who've had the same size ad every year for 20 years, and you're trying to flog them a bigger ad. It absolutely did me in.
That's terrible.
In the end, it did me in so much. They fired me because I just my heart wasn't in it.
Yeah.
So I then got one of these lifestyle magazines that come through the door, the local advertisers. I got one of those through the door. Obviously, I'm now unemployed at this point, and thought, oh, am I working for him? Obviously, having sold advertising space, contacted this guy, got a job working for him. He was a real character, and he was running his magazine almost like as a front door to get advertising business or print and marketing business in. So it was like, we'll run your ad in our magazine. We can do leaflets for you. We can do brochures for you. We can do point of sale for you, all that sort of thing. So a nice business model. The problem was it was proper hand to mouth. We were working at, this is before working from home was a thing. We were working out of his house.
Right.
It is loft upstairs. There was me and him, and we ended up with a designer, and then we ended up with a secretary or an admin girl. But he was so badly run. He was a brilliant salesperson. He'd bring the business back in and they go, right, Phil, sort it out. So I sort of became an account manager.
Okay.
At this point, we were living hand to mouth. I think we might have just had our first child, or very close to having our first child. And I was like, I've got to get a proper job. And one of the accounts we'd worked on was a local car dealer. And we'd done his leaflets and brochures and all that sort of, and he'd done his ads in the magazine. And one of the major lead ad agencies, a company called Brahm, had just used to run the Porsche account, had just won the Lada account, and needed an account manager. And I went in and said, look, I've handled this account for this local car dealer.
Oh, cool.
And I got the job. And I was ecstatic. And again, depending on how old your listeners are, you will remember Lada cars. One of the perks of being the account manager for Lada cars was I got a free Lada car every 6 months.
Okay, that's cool.
Which is, at the time, we didn't have a car, so I was really chuffed. And at the time, Lada had done this sort of, they called it a 4x4, but it was basically a van with the glass in the back rather than panels, which was really shocking. But yeah, I got a new car every month. So that was my crossover from selling advertising space into becoming an account manager in an ad agency. And that opened me up to, we were a full service ad agency. That opened me up to all aspects of the advertising and marketing industry. So it's point of sale, direct mail, media buying, brochures, posters, TV, everything, which was great. It was a fantastic learning curve, and culturally was the best place I ever worked. And I took a lot of the stuff that I learned there into my own business.
So what made the culture there, work space, so significant or positive for you?
The Brahm was 5 people: Baxendale, Rand, Allen, Hanley, McPhail. And they were 5 very unique characters. They're all very, very different, but just, people talk about company culture now. They were well ahead of the curve, and it was just a great place to work. It was inspirational. It was amazing. Just one of those places, and people will work, if they're fortunate enough, will work at places that stick with them forever. And a couple of points that really, really reiterated it. The B, Mike Baxendale, died, must be 3 or 4 years ago. And I went to his memorial ceremony, and I'd not worked there for 15 years. So I'd maybe seen him 3 or 4 times since, but I'd not seen him. And there were people there who I'd not seen for 15, 20 years who'd worked there.
Wow.
And it was just amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And secondly, I posted something on LinkedIn recently, which I called Brahm Tag. Just tag 3 of the people who worked at Brahm, and it exploded because everybody has this company in their hearts. It's just an amazing place.
So you do a good stint at Braun, which is what, 6 years
Yep.
so, from what I can gather. And
Yeah, that's the longest I was ever employed in one place.
and you were happy there. You went through different promotions, I presume, at this point.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And you know, it got to point, and sometimes people who work in service industries don't understand this. When you handle an advertising account, you produce work for people, and you maybe show them 3 alternatives. We can do version 1, version 2, version 3. As an account handler, I'm not bothered. Just tell me which one you want to do. We'll produce it. We'll make it happen. We think you should go with number 1. If you go with 3, I don't care. Just do it. And you get to the point where you go, do you know what? I want to be on the other side of the fence. I want to be the decision maker. And I think this was my uh
Light bulb moment of some sort.
this I think it was the internal me. It was the internal me saying, I want to be the boss,
Yep.
without me recognizing it at the time.
Okay.
And the other thing that happened around that time, so this is 90, sort of 98, 99, 2000, this thing happened called the internet.
Yep.
And we had clients coming to us saying, I want one of these newfangled websites that I've heard about. I've read about it in the Sunday Times. I want one. And we were like, shit, how the hell do you make websites? So we sort of created what you now call a digital division. And I was really interested in it. And I was given the role of account director of our new digital division. It was really making it up as you go along, properly making it up as you go along. But so the two things together, we've got this new exciting thing, the internet, that I thought, this might have legs. There might be something in this.
Yeah.
And this sort of internal thing in me saying, I want to be the decision maker.
That's interesting.
I want to go client side. So I ended up with a job at William Hill, the sports book, whose head office was in Leeds. And I was recruited to launch their first ever online casino, which was William Hill saying, we found somebody who can produce a casino for us. Here it is. Off you go. Right. Okay. And it's weird because at the time there were quite a lot of internet casinos who had been launched. And I thought, shit, we're a bit late to the party here. Bear in mind, this is 2000, 2001. And while I was there, we came across online bingo as a concept. And I was asked to produce a report for the board. Should we get into online bingo? Which I did, presented it to the board. They decided not to because they were old school bookies. So old school bookies going to casino was quite a big step for them. Going to bingo was even further. So that didn't happen. End of the year, I ended up leaving. And long story short, eventually had a light bulb moment when I thought, actually, there might be this online bingo might be a thing. So I sort of dusted this report off, switched it around a bit, turned it into a business plan, and took it out to market to pitch for angel investment, which would have been the first pay-to-play online bingo site in the UK. So I was ahead of the curve. I didn't know it at the time, but I was way ahead of the curve. I got no funding whatsoever.
How
Got
many people do
nothing.
you think you spoke to at that point to try and get funding?
I presented. I mean, the angel investment industry now is huge.
Yeah, I
At
was going
that
to say,
time,
it must be very nascent. Yeah.
it wasn't that big. We probably saw a couple of groups in Leeds, maybe 4 or 5 in London, and we got no funding. And I think for 3 reasons. Number one, it was legally a grey area. So it's like I'm saying, can we have some money in a project that is legally grey? Number two, the dot-com bubble had just started bursting, so that wasn't really very good. And number 3 was they were saying, well, if this is going to be so big, how come Gala and Mecca aren't all over it? The 2 big players in the UK. The reason for that is, as with any industry, the big boys are very happy raking in the cash, doing it the old school way, and don't see what's going on at the coalface. So they weren't, I think they were vaguely aware of it, but it wasn't an issue to them. So those were the three main reasons why we didn't get funding. But what happened was I'd built a very basic website, which listed, there were about a dozen online bingo sites only in the US at the time. And so I listed them as a really basic directory page, but I'd put a pop-up questionnaire on there to get some data about players. So age, demographic, spend, sex, recency, frequency, all that sort of stuff. So that when I did my presentation, my angel investment pitch, I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. Oh yes, I know what the customer looks like. That's, which I did. I was the online bingo expert in the world for a few years.
Wow.
And what happened was a number of the American bingo websites found my website and said, hey, can we advertise on your website? And this is where the dots join together.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I've sold advertising space in print. How hard can it be to do it on a website? Worked out how to put banners on websites, said to them, send me some money and I'll run your ad. And that's how the business started, totally accidentally. That wasn't the business plan. We had no funding. It started with myself, my wife, kitchen table, 2 young kids, and properly make it up as you go along, because there wasn't a market out there. And it just, right place, right time. And the other thing, I was at the time I was still looking for a proper job.
Yeah.
And I got offered a proper job. I got offered an account director job at a digital advertising agency. Car, salary, the whole shooting match. And I went in to see them on the Friday before the Monday that was due to start, and said, I can't take this job because I've got this thing that might be happening. I've got to run with it. I've got to run with it. And I rang my mum after I'd come out of that meeting and said, Mum, you know that job I told you I'd got? Yes, darling. I've just jacked it in. Oh, okay. Bearing in mind, this is now full circle for me ringing her and saying, you know that job you got me at the accountancy? I've jacked that one in. So that's how it started, totally by accident. And it was just seeing an opportunity. And we talked about this the other day. It's not only having the opportunity, it's not only seeing the opportunity, it's then grasping it. And lots of people, and quite happily, and I could have quite happily done it, would have taken the job. I got 2 young kids at the time, only one salary coming in the house. It wouldn't have been the wrong decision to take, a very good job with a very good package. But we didn't. We threw the dice, and fingers crossed.
It's interesting about this one, the previous interview with Andy Gott, or Dr. Andy Gott, I should say. The celebrity photographer talks a lot about this, like, look, and you call it right time, right place. But at the same time, how many other people were with seeing websites? And you said you got Mecca, you had all these gambling companies. Like, there were enough other people that could have done this, but you did it. And there is an element of kind of luck being where preparation meets opportunity, because you've understood advertising for a period of time. You've done websites, you started that digital thing, and you winged it. But at the end of the day, that's what most people do most of the time, if we're honest. And most, whenever you're pushing something new or you're trying something, a lot of it is uncharted territory, and being willing to be dealing with that uncertainty. And and at the end of the day, again, sat at that kitchen table, that decision you've made, 95, 97, 99% maybe people would go, I've got 2 young kids, I've got a wife, I've got a great opportunity to earn a stable salary. Like, this bigger thing may or may not happen, but like, I've got to go do the thing that's right, that's stability. So like, that isn't luck. That's a definite decision that you've made, that you're giving something a go, which we also talked about. I don't think enough people do that in today's world. They kind of have all these ideas bubbling around, and I know you write them in your drafts in Gmail, I do mine on the Son, everyone does them differently on post-it notes or whatnot. But actually, at some point, you got to do one of them. If not, there's no point talking about it. I think there's Go on, Karen.
Sorry, just to pick up on that one, and we'll probably come on to it later. I do work with business owners now as a business sounding board, and one of my big things, or two things tied together, is follow your gut
Mm.
and JFDI.
Yep.
Yep. I won't say that. You can keep it non-explicit at the moment. The follow your gut thing, I always say, look, yeah, do your SWOT analysis. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? What are the
Sure.
threats? And what's the market saying to me? But you're the business owner. You're the one who knows the market. You know your market better than anybody else. If your gut is saying go in that direction, go in that direction, because A, you might be right, and fantastic, well done.
For sure.
If you don't do it, all you'll do is spend all your time thinking, "Oh, I wonder what would have happened if I'd done that."
Yes.
And I think the other thing in business, everybody gets really uptight about lots and lots and lots of things. With all due respect to everybody's businesses, it's not life and death. We're not doing
Nope.
brain surgery.
You struggle.
You're not, as long as you're not, putting, your house on red.
Yes.
There's most situations are not going to be that disastrous to make that decision.
Yep.
So just do it. And as we say in Yorkshire, either shit or get off the pot. And yeah, one of the worst things you can do is not make a decision,
Yes.
because all you're doing is stressing about decisions you have to make. And you'll keep stressing until you make the decision. Then, hey, guess what? The stress goes away because you've made the decision.
For sure.
One way or the other,
The point you make about gut instinct is something I'm a big proponent of, and I've done a Bernie issues about that some time ago, about kind of following your gut, and really I think it's Thinking Fast and Slow. Daniel Kahneman, probably getting that wrong, but it's Thinking Fast and Slow, and he talks about like nurses or firefighters like sensing stuff, because the gut instinct is all of the thinking, all of the knowledge being distilled into feeling. That's really what it is. And so people are like, oh, that's a bit dangerous, gut instinct. It's like, no, that's the thing that actually you require, because at some point you've got to make a decision. And if all you're doing is just this analysis paralysis situation, which is a big thing people do, you're just going to forever be going round and round in circles, and as you say, never making a decision that goes anywhere. So I'm super interested now. So we're sat, what year are we in? 2000? Or we 2001?
This is 2000, 2001, 2002, around that sort of time.
Okay, so luck would have it, a first client comes through, which is a bingo site in America, but you were really just launching this find a bingo site just to get the data to be able to launch your own competitor in the UK. So you get the first check in and you're like, oh, this is nice. How do you go from there to selling a business for a good sum? Because that's a story that's in itself.
Yeah, so we were lucky in that we hit an industry that was growing exponentially. So the first 5 years was purely US, and there was just bingo site after bingo site after bingo site launching. So we just
So is
added
that
them.
UK players playing on US websites?
It was a mix. It was a mix, but it was just they were hosted. They weren't actually hosted in the US, but most of them were in dollars, and they were hosted offshore, so places like Antigua.
Yep.
All sorts of weird and wonderful places we had to look up on maps, which is why a lot of them we said, send us the money first, then we'll run your ads.
Right. Yeah.
So we sort of we shelved the idea of launching a bingo site and just rolled with Bingo Directory.
Yep.
And then in 2006, the Americans changed the law and made it illegal for banks to fund online gambling. So they didn't ban online gambling. They made it illegal for banks to fund online gambling.
Okay.
So if you put your credit card through, obviously it's going to be processed by a bank. They made that illegal. So our industry, our business, we lost 80% of our revenue on a Friday night.
Wow.
Okay.
And
now
at this point, like, how much traffic was going to the site? Like, how did it start? Where did it get to?
Oh, I don't know what the numbers were, but we were in I think revenue by then would have been in the hundreds of thousands.
Right. And was it like
So
incremental, like every year, like
yeah, it was just it was going
or
incremental. But
your
what had
costs
happened,
must have been low, right? At that point, you must have had quite low costs.
well, at the time, well, we didn't take on. We started with freelancers. We took on an office in 2005 and took 2 staff. So it took us 5 years to get 2 staff and an office.
Patience, the
When
key things there.
yeah, when the American market disappeared, we had 3 members of staff.
Mm.
We spent the weekend, because this happened on a Friday night.
Did you know of
Okay.
this, or you just were like, "What the hell's happening?" and looked at it?
Well, the Americans had been rumbling about banning online gaming for a while. And what happened was you have to understand the American legal system, but they basically tacked on this unlawful, it's called UIGA, Unlawful Internet
Gaming as well.
Gambling Act or something.
Okay.
Anyway, onto the back of a port bill. It was about what can go in and out of ports. He was just like tagged on the back of it. And then we talked about it for a while, and it happened on a Friday night. So we spent the weekend basically saying, shit, 80% of our revenue's gone. Which member of staff do we get rid of? Which, as a business owner, is a tough one. In the end, we got to a point where we said, do you know what? The amount of money we'll save getting rid of one member of the staff, let's just roll with it and keep going. Now, we'd already by then started a UK bingo site, a UK version of the bingo site, which at the time just listed bingo halls. So we had some content. And there was the odd site was now taking bets in sterling. So, and by then we also had a free bingo site as well, which was another vehicle for advertising. And basically what happened was the market went from the US and said, right, we've all got to get to the US. Where are we going next? And they all decamped to the UK, where we were like almost like a trap. We sort of sat waiting and go, hey, guess who's got a website ready? So
Wow.
again, we were in the right place. It wasn't, you'd have to be a brilliant brain surgeon to realize that was going to happen. So we were ready when it happened. So it kicked on again. And 2006, 7, 8, 9 were huge growth times in the UK online bingo market. So we grew and grew and grew. And what had happened as well, the market had matured. And rather than just taking straight advertising payments, we were also taking affiliate revenue. So we would get a share of revenue that a player would lose on a bingo site ongoing for lifetime. So the market grew and grew and grew. Where are we now? In about 2012, and this is going to sound arrogant, it's not meant to be, it wasn't at all. I got bored. We had a business that was running, was making money. The entrepreneurial excitement had gone.
Right. Which is
And
like
a lot of entrepreneurs get this.
Working.
Yeah, it was like all the plates are spinning, and we were just sat there going, this is all right. The money was coming in, which is great. So he said, right, I'm bored. I want to do something else. We'll sell it. But plan B was always, actually, we won't sell it. We'll get somebody else in to run it for us.
Yeah.
And we got very, very close to selling it. We got an offer on the table, which was good, but not retiring good, but it was okay. And it was actually Jane who said, no, I'm not going to do it.
That's your wife, is it?
Yeah. So we had to go back to the business broker and go, we're not selling anymore. She went absolutely ballistic. But plan B was get somebody else in. So I got a number 2 in and took a step back, and he started running the business. And actually that in itself is a sort of a business 101 lesson. How do you, when you've run your own business, how do you find somebody to step in? How do you manage them? How do you motivate them? How do you determine what you, previously as the owner, now do? So actually, it was a really interesting process, and I talk about this a lot, of creating a new job spec for me, as well as a job spec for him. Because I didn't want to step on his toes. One of the questions he asked in his interview was, are you ready to let go? And I was like, yeah, of course I am. But then there's then the complications of you parachute him into the team and go, hey guys, this is the new boss. And then, day 2, one of the members of staff comes and knocks on my door and says, oh, Phil, can we just discuss, ABC? no, you have to speak to Simon, which obviously puts people's noses out of joint. So it's a really, really interesting dynamic thing of I've got to be clear what my role is. He's got to be clear what his role is, and the team have to be clear where those lines are. What he did, what he was very good at doing, what he did very, very well, was he injected a new energy and a new pair of eyes into the business. We upgraded loads of systems, we upgraded loads of processes. It was weird, actually. I think it's probably 5 years he was with me, because he was with me when we sold. We went from sort of going to conferences, and I go, I knew everybody at that point. This is Simon. And I go, oh, hello. And then we go sort of a couple of years later, oh, hi, Phil. Hi, Simon. Then, as I'm taking a step further and further and further back, we were going to places, and Simon would go, this is Phil.
That's interesting. That's so interesting.
Which is really, really weird. Really, really weird. But your question was, how do we sell? So I'd always been of the idea that if somebody gave me enough money, I'd walk away. It was always, I know a lot of people get very close to their businesses. It's my baby. How can I let it go? Da, 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 da. I'd always been, I'll carry on running it because it's making lots of money. But if somebody gives me a big enough bag of cash, happy to walk away. So we were approached all the time. We had loads of NDAs in the drawer, and nothing ever happened with them. And then one company came along, and we were lucky that by now the affiliate market was online casino, online bingo, online sports betting, online poker, online lottery, online slots. It was huge. And there were a number of companies who were aggregators, who were like buying the small operators out. We got approached by one of them, and they said, we want to buy you. And I said, okay, I want this silly number. And they went, okay. I went, all right. Fine. So we went down to London to meet them. And they said, oh, well, we said yes. There's this caveat and that caveat and this caveat and that caveat. So we said, no, we're not doing the deal. But what I then did, because it was quite a small industry, I then contacted all the other aggregators and said, look, technically we're not for sale. But if you wanted to talk to us, we'd be open to listening. And eventually one of them came back. I was very close to doing the deal with them. Then another one came back to me, and I said, well, look, I'm, a man of my word, I'm doing a deal with these guys. If you want me to swap horses, because this was quite late in the day, we've just about signed heads of terms, you've got to move the dial both financially and structurally. And he came back in 24 hours and said, right, I'll give you X, and this is the structure. And we went, okay. And that was mid-November, and we signed on the dotted line on April the 10th, wow. 2018. Now, that then generated the hardest thing I've ever done in my life in business. So, people always say, don't tell the team if you're selling, which is absolutely right. Nobody knew what's going on. The issue was we were bought by a non-UK PLC. And they had no operational base in the UK and didn't want an operational base in the UK. So they wanted to get rid of all our team. Okay. So obviously from a TUPE point of view is illegal, but our lawyers got round that. But I had to walk into the office on the Tuesday morning, bearing in mind I'd just come back from 2.5 weeks in Thailand. So it was like really
ideal.
Like, he's just been swanning off for two weeks. So I came back in, did the, team meeting in the office. And by then we had two teams. So we had one of those offices where we had bifold doors in the middle. So it was obviously something was going on. So I had to stand up in front of the team and go, hey guys, we've sold the business, which yes, was a surprise, but wasn't a huge surprise in the market that was going on. And so, we've sold the business and the buyers don't want you, and you've got 3 months notice. Now, bearing in mind, I still had staff member number 3 and staff member number 5 still in the team. And obviously I had my number two, who'd been, a big player in what we've done for the last 5 years. That was the most difficult thing I've ever done. I practiced that speech on the plane all the way back from Thailand. And it was horrific. Absolutely horrific. I then left the room as I'd agreed with Simon. He then took over. We had lawyers, various legal reasons. We had lawyers.
Yep.
The Friday, so this was Tuesday. The Friday, I laid down on the bed and burst into tears. At the end of it, it was just that week was so stressful. But we got above market value for the business, and we got all of our cash in 3 months. No earn out, give them the keys, walk away.
It's a pretty sweet deal.
And this is, and I talk to people about this all the time. There are two aspects when you sell a business. Number one is the price. More importantly, is the structure.
Right, that's what you meant by structure. How it actually.
Yes, yeah. So a lot of most business sales, you will get a lump sum on sale, and there will be a part of it will be delayed. It might be an earnout, it might be hitting targets, it might just be time based. It might be over 2 years, it might be over 3 years, it might be over 12 months, whatever it might be. Somebody once said to me, whenever you sell your business, whatever the lump sum is, assume that is the price, and the earn out or the rest of it as a bonus, because all sorts of things can go wrong, and all sorts of things do go wrong. And I've got friends who've had problems with that. We were very lucky. We got, I think, if I remember rightly, it was about 60% on day one, and they were 3 tranches over the next 3 months that topped up to 100. So in 3 months, we had all our cash, and the keys had gone.
Wow. And so you have this moment, well, it has to be months, right? Because when you've kind of agreed the sale, but then there's at some point a time where you're like signed some documents and you're like, all right, this is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
At what point were you in a celebration or jubilant mood, or was that delayed until like after telling the team afterwards? Like where was that?
This is the really weird thing. Whenever you see people selling businesses in films, it's champagne corks and backslapping and all that sort of stuff. And I've got a friend who works in corporate finance, and he said to me, it won't be like that at all. Yeah. It'll just be relief. And so the emotion when you sign the piece of paper, I'd say, seriously, we flew back into Manchester from Thailand, overnight flight. We landed in Manchester at whatever it was, 10 o'clock in the morning. We were in the solicitor's office at 2 o'clock. We were out of the solicitor's offices at maybe 20 past 2. So we sign here. Yeah, congratulations, you sold your business. And it's like, okay, right, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Are we just like, you walk out into the street and then you stood there and go, is that it? The elation, it's weird because the elation comes, the two big elation points are when he verbally agreed the deal. And it was like, woo, this is exciting. And when the money hits the bank.
Yep.
And I sent a screenshot to my wife, and it was like, look at this! Oh my god! Wow. And then within 5 minutes, it's then right. Okay, I've got a process to go through. I've got to tell the team. I've got to organize this. I've got to hand over this. I've got to find this piece of paper. I've got to find that. We had loads of things we had to do. So you just go into function mode, which is why at the end of that week I was like just whacked.
Yeah.
And it's they're I think looking back, they're the two elation points, but it's really weird. It is really, really weird. Speak to anybody who sold a business and they will inevitably say this is just odd. It's not, because then you go. So we finished on a Friday. We finished on a Friday the 13th, just to make it interesting. And like, when you work with a team Friday, right? Have a nice weekend. See you Monday. We were like, bye. So we took the team out for lunch, and we had drinks, and we went to the pub, and then eventually sort of people were sort of drifting off, and it's like, again, sort of tears and stuff like that. I mean, quite a few of the team I'm still in touch with, which is great. But then you, like, even on the Monday or the Tuesday, it's like, what do we do now? It's just emotionally, the whole thing is really, really weird.
Mm.
At no point did I have buyer's remorse. I think we sold at the right time and we did the right thing. But this is 5.5 years on. I'm still struggling a little bit with what to do with myself. A lot of people will jump straight back in and do something else. Just go, right, I'm off. I'm going to do something else. And it's like almost like jumping from one ship to the next. I sat down and thought, well, what am I going to do? And somebody said to me, oh, you should be a business mentor. And my first response was, well, who's going to listen to me? I was just making it up as I went along, as we all do.
Yes.
But actually, what you forget is you learn so much on that journey that when you do sit down with people, and this is what I'm doing now, you've got so much advice you can pass on and help people, not necessarily giving them the answers, but make them consider the right things. Have you thought about this? Have you considered that? Have you thought about this? And then they can go away and make their own decisions. But at the same time, people have to make the mistakes because that's the best way to learn. They're not going to learn it. I'm doing this because Phil told me. Well, that's not, I'm doing this because I chatted with Phil and we worked out this was the best thing to do. Is a much better situation.
For sure. Well, one thing, given what I do for a living, selling watches, I do come across quite a lot of people like yourself that have done extremely well in business or in different capacities, but particularly on the business kind of down that vein. And they get to this point as you have, and all of a sudden, kind of at this early, I've got more money than I need to survive. So that's bases covered and some. And then it's like, as you say, what do I do now? And I've got a few friends in these spots as well. And it's interesting because I think, again, a lot of people listening will be like, oh, what a problem to have that is, you know what I mean? But it's still a problem. I remember a previous business, £250,000 injected into it. An old mentor of mine from Tesco said, have the two devils on your shoulder, you have time and money. And I'm like young at this point. I was like, what are you talking about? And then you start to realize that is problematic. And whilst it provides lots of opportunities, there's a lot of other things that you can kind of occupy yourself with, other endeavors, perhaps potentially. So what I find interesting is with you, which I think is a little bit different than lots of people, is you took a step back, 5 years before the sale? Is that right? So
Yeah,
were you already kind of part-time, or your role just different in the business? The reason I say that is, like, when you sold up, it wasn't like you were a CEO, like day to day in the mess, and then it was like nothing. There was still an
yeah,
element of that, I suspect.
yeah. It was. I mean, my role had. By the time we finished, my role had three things. One was to manage and motivate and develop my number two, Simon. The second was to, alongside him, determine the strategy for the business. And the third was to put the finance stroke facility in place for him to develop that strategy. But there was still day-to-day stuff for me to do. But it was sort of more big picture stuff. So I'd have like a weekly meeting with him. We might sit and talk about strategy once a quarter. We'd also we got a guy in. We got a consultant in because we this must have been about 2 years out from selling. We had three big strategy plans. We could do A, B, or C and we sort of determined which one. Or we trying to think. Well, we got an outside consultant in, and he did a brilliant exercise with my team as part of this, which was, and I've done this with clients as well. And if anybody's listening, you should get this done. He sat down with my team individually anonymously and said, what's good about the company, what's bad about the company, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, where are the opportunities, what are the problems, what are the issues, and then reported back to me. So it wasn't, oh, he said this, she said that. It was themes. So there's a general theme of this, or a general theme of that, or a general theme of the other. One of the themes was, as with many entrepreneurs, I'm a shiny new objects thing. So I come in on a Monday morning. I've seen an article, I've read a piece, I've seen something on telly. Right, I've got this great new idea. We're going to do this, right? And everybody's got to drop everything, and we'll do this. And then, like 2 weeks later, I'd come back and go, why hasn't that been done on the main business? Oh, well, you said we were doing this new project. Oh, we're not doing that anymore. Forget about that. And what he said was, the report came back to say I was the problem in the business. Like, get out of the way. And what he suggested to me, which I did, was he said, take all your new brilliant ideas and put them in another company and let the business do what the business should do and focus on what it's doing. So I actually set up a second company, which had all my pet projects in. But it was a really great way, on one hand, for the business to flourish because I got out of the way, but it also meant I had pet projects that I was still doing and keeping my hand in. But the most of the time, I was just told by Simon, go away on holiday, leave me alone. If there's any problems, I'll let you know. Which obviously, as a business owner, you have to grow into. Like, oh, what about that? What about that?
Am I right in thinking that the business was always, as you say, like an affiliate? So you would basically you're sending players out to actual bingo sites. That was the concept.
Yeah, correct. So the idea is
Whatnot.
we get people to come to the site, read reviews, click on ads, and then go to a pay-to-play bingo site and deposit money.
Right.
So it was like a bounce effect. So we wanted to come, but we wanted to come back. So by the time we sold, we had 440 bingo sites listed on our website.
Wow.
We didn't have a commercial deal with all of them, and we did this right from the start. I always wanted us to have every single bingo site on the site. So that was our USP. So other companies who did similar things to us, unsurprisingly, would only have sites they had a commercial deal with on their website. Our USP was, you will find every single bingo site on our website. The idea being, yes, you might click onto one that we haven't got a deal with, fine. But I know you'll come back because I know that every single bingo site is on here.
Right.
And we borrowed things like from Amazon, where it says, buyers who clicked on this also clicked on these bingo sites. Obviously, the other three were people we had a commercial deal with, and this one was the one we didn't. And little things like that. But I was quite happy for them to go and play on a different bingo site that we didn't have a deal with, because I knew they'd come back because it was core to our product USP.
That makes a lot of sense. I think so. Now you have alluded to your latest endeavor, is you call it the business sounding board, which I was looking into this. You have like a Venn diagram that shows you're effectively sitting in the sweet spot, as it were, of a coach, mentor, and non-exec. And this concept of lonely at the top, and definitely themes that you do feel when you're running a business. I've seen it when I've worked in PLC as Tesco. I've seen it in family business. I've seen it even in my own business, that you do sometimes get to a point you end up talking to a friend who's got no interest, or a family member that's got absolutely no interest or decent input, either or. And you're like, okay, I do a big deal sometimes. I'm like, well, there's no one to really like tell, or
is this a good idea?
I just come back, and I did a pretty big deal the other day, and I came back home and I was like, all right, like just gonna go eat something, and that's it. I was like, it's not quite there. And I think that is a super interesting space, because just from I've met you obviously the other day, and obviously now spent some good time understanding your kind of journey here. You come across, in the true sense to me, as someone who's authentic and says it how it is, and no airs and graces, has done it from scratch to a good sellout, and And I think just would give an honest kind of like, have you thought of this? Like, have you thought of that without any agenda, I think, which is really important because there's so many people out there with who just have a microphone and go on Instagram and present themselves as this, that, and the other. And some are credible and whatnot, but I think it's the delivery that I think you have that I think is, as I said, in the short time that I've got to know you, that's a kind of really kind of big asset.
Thank
There are
you.
two things I wanted to touch upon on this that I came across articles, particularly given the time of year that we're at, and kind of maybe leave it here for today. One, and the two big things, but perhaps you could kind of summarize your thoughts on it. One of the articles was about time management, and the second one was what you call a personal development budget. If you could just give a little kind of summary as to your time management, because I think that's a huge thing where people go wrong. And then this personal development budget, I think, super interesting too.
Yeah, just to go back onto the point about the business sounding board, and thank you for everything you said about me being authentic and all that sort of stuff. The reason I offer this, and I use the phrase, it doesn't need to be lonely at the top, is because I've been there and I've been that lonely at the top. You know, who do you sit with and say, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Or I'm stuck. Or I've got so much going on, I don't even know where to start. Or even as an accountability partner. Yeah, it's great running your own business because you can make whatever decisions you want. But you end up, and I compare it to sort of a cold piece of broccoli on the plate. When it's your own business, you do all the exciting and sexy things, the interesting stuff, and you don't eat that cold piece of broccoli, the really horrible thing you know you should do as a business owner, but you don't do. If you've got an accountability partner, like somebody like me, they say, Charles, last week we discussed A, B, and C, and you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. Have you done them?
Yeah.
Now, when it's your own business, you don't. So what I try and offer is that experience, but also total objectivity as well as total confidentiality to be able to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I won't necessarily say that's a shit idea, but say, have you considered this? Have you considered that? And the places most people go for advice, other than people like me, usually have unconscious bias. So if you go and speak to your mate or a mate who's got a business or your partner or your solicitor or your accountant or your wife or your husband, they will have a subconscious bias that they're not necessarily going to say, actually, Charles, that's a load of shit. The old ugly baby syndrome. So that's what I offer as a general thing. The two articles you're talking about, the time management thing is something I use. So my go-to business book is 7 Habits by Stephen Covey. Okay, which is it's on the shelf up there. You can probably see it, or you might be able to see it. And one of the things in there is the important urgent squares. And what I do is I have like a point system that says what's urgent, what's important, what's not important, what's urgent and important, all that sort of thing. And it makes you prioritize. It's a point scoring system. If you go to my website, philfraser.co.uk, it's on there. So you'll find that. And what it means is you end up doing the stuff you should be doing, not the stuff either you like doing or the easy stuff. So that's the first thing from the time management point of view. And it makes you so much more effective. It is just amazing. The second thing is something I came across actually from somebody else's podcast, was about personal development. So most businesses, you will have a training budget for your team. We all want to develop our teams, and it might be a big one. It might be, it might be formal courses, it might be online courses, whatever it might be. Very, very few business owners apply a training budget to themselves. In that, and that could be, it could be management skills, it could be a management course, it could be presentation skills, it could be a sales course. There's all sorts of stuff out there. It might be an additional skill. It might be something like a language or playing a guitar, but it's all about self-development. And it's your business. You've got a training budget in there. Use it to develop yourself. But if you invest in you, specifically as a business manager or business owner, that is good. That is, think about the word investment. What do you do with investment? You put money in, you expect more out at the back. You're investing in your team. Why aren't you investing in you as a business owner / business manager. And, one of the first start points in that personal development journey or personal development investment is getting yourself a business coach or a business mentor or a business sounding board, somebody like me. And it's interesting, I've got a client who's just rebooked with me, who we finished working together pretty much a year ago last year, and he's only just posted a review of me on LinkedIn. Very nice review. Go and search it out. But he said to me in an email, he was reticent to do it because he didn't want his team to see that he'd had to look for help or support, which is just nonsense, which is just bananas, because it's all about self-development. And your team are not going to look at you and go, oh, Charles doesn't know what he's doing. He's had to get some training. It's like, wow, we've got a great boss because he's developing himself, which, trickle down, one would assume will help the business get better and us as a team get better. So I'd strongly recommend anybody to get themselves a business coach or a business mentor or a business sounding board just to help them along. There's nothing wrong with holding your hand up and saying, I need some help, I need some support. And usually what I usually find with clients is they know the answer. It either needs eking out of them or just going through the filing. I mean, I use two different analogies. One is like a giant filing cabinet in your head, and all you're encouraging to do is flick through and then pull out the file and go, oh, there it is. Or for those of you who watch Harry Potter, it's Dumbledore with a pensieve, just bringing out the answer. It's in there. It's just encouraging somebody, or it might not even be in there, but it's encouraged them to find an answer to their problem. And what happens is people have a problem. It might be a strategic problem, might be a clarity problem, might be a supply chain problem. They have a problem. They try and fix it with whatever solution. That solution doesn't work. That creates more of a problem. And then the next layer below is, what is that problem doing to you as a person? How's that making you feel? It's stress, it's fatigue, it's anxiety, it's making you ratty, it's making you upset. So actually, you've got to get to the source solving that problem. And often somebody like a mentor, like a coach, like a business sounding board can eke that out of you without even knowing anything about your business. My first, it's funny, when I first set up as a business sounding board, sorry, I'm going on and on and on about this.
No, it's interesting. It's cool.
When I first set up, I did what everybody's told to do: create your client avatar. So I thought, okay, what does my client avatar look like? It's going to be, I worked in online marketing, so it's probably in that sector. My turnover ended up just over £2 million, so it's going to be around there. What was the other thing? There was another aspect. Oh yeah, we ended up with a team, I think about 12. So that sort of size business was my client avatar. That's my ideal avatar. My first client was what was she? £6 million turnover, 120 staff, 5 locations in a sector I knew nothing about. But it's all about, the issue is the business ownership, not the sector. It's not a sector specific problem. It's a business. It's running your own business. Running your own business is fantastic. It's great fun, really brilliant. If it goes well, you make lots of money, which is brilliant. But it's highly stressful as well. And the more help you can get, the better.
That's very true. Well, I think that's been a good, well-rounded, where we started from, what you're doing now, where you're at now. So very, very interesting interview for sure.
Can I just say, for anybody who's listening, if you go to philfraser.co.uk/newsletter, sign up for my newsletter, you will get a free download that will help you solve your biggest business problem in 10 steps.
Well, there we go. Some practical advice too. And I'll pop that link into the notes on YouTube and Spotify as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Am I allowed to mention the Leeds Business Podcast?
Of course. Pleasure.
Okay. I also host my own podcast called the Leeds Business Podcast, which you'll find at leedsbusinesspodcast.com. And again, sign up and you'll hear all about the fantastic interviews I do with brilliant Leeds business owners. Sorry, Charles, you're on the wrong side of the Pennines. Can't have you on.
Is that how it is? Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And you're a Scum fan, so I can't, really, really can't.
Oh well. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, it's been super interesting to hear from a success story and how we got there and what you're doing now for sure.
That's great. Thank you very much for having me on. Hope everybody found it useful.